January 20th, 2026, the World Economic Forum in Davos. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney takes the stage and gives a speech that marks an inflection point.
Carney said, in 1978, the Czech dissident Václav Havel, later president, wrote an essay called The Power of the Powerless. And in it, he asked a simple question: how did the communist system sustain itself? And his answer began with a greengrocer. Every morning, this shopkeeper places a sign in his window: Workers of the world unite. He doesn't believe it. No one does. But he places the sign anyway to avoid trouble, to sign compliance, to get along. And because every shopkeeper on every street does the same, the system persists, not through violence alone, but through participation of ordinary people in rituals they privately know to be false.
Havel called this thing living within a lie.
The system's power comes not from its truth, but from everyone's willingness to perform it as if it were true. And its fragility comes from the same source. When even one person stops performing, when the greengrocer removes his sign, the illusion begins to crack. Friends, Carney said, it's time for companies and countries to take down their signs.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Political Dispatch. We analyze politics from around the world. In each episode, we pick a recent political moment and explore why it matters. My name is Sitko Ripari.
And I'm Tom Spare. This week we're without Lily, so we'll do our best to fill her shoes. This is our first episode of 2026, and it's already been quite a start to the year.
Absolutely, Tom. The Greenland crisis, Venezuela invaded, tariff threats against NATO allies. The list just goes on.
And we're reading part of Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's speech from Davos in Switzerland. So commentators believe, and we tend to agree, that this speech marks a departure from the world as we know it, the start of something new, chaotic, unpredictable. Carney's speech offers us an insight into how he thinks a new world order will form.
By invoking Havel, he's saying middle powers like Canada need to stop pretending that the old system still works. Stop putting the sign. Stop living within the lie.
And to understand why this matters, we need to go back to Prague in the early 1990s, to the newly formed Czech Republic. It's a warm summer's evening and the president is sitting by the Vltava River with some very esteemed guests, the Rolling Stones.
They've just performed a concert showing the world that this new country is open for business, shedding the weight of communism. After dinner, one of the Stones says, "Mr. President, you've got that beautiful castle, but it's not lit up at night."
And the president shrugs, well, we're short of money for the lights. It's not a priority for us.
Next day, the Rolling Stones had their crew install the lights, paid for it themselves. Prague Castle has been lit up every night since, because a rock band decided a newly free country deserved to shine.
And that president was Václav Havel, playwright, dissident, philosopher. And in 1978, while Czechoslovakia was still under Soviet control, Havel wrote an essay called The Power of the Powerless, which Carney was quoting from. It's become essential reading for understanding of how systems of power actually work.
The essay, which we quoted initially, tells the story of a greengrocer. Picture the scene: a fruit and vegetable shop in communist Czechoslovakia. In the window, right between the onions and carrots, the manager places a slogan: Workers of the world, unite.
And Havel asks, why does he do it? Is he truly enthusiastic about the unification of the world's proletariat?
No, he's completely indifferent to the message. He puts it up simply because it has been done that way for years, because everyone does it, and because that is the way it has to be.
If he refused, he could be accused of disloyalty. He could face trouble, so the slogan stays up, a ritual required for what Havel calls a tranquil life.
But here's the thing. Slogan isn't actually about workers. It's a coded signal. If you translate what the sign really means, it says, I, the greengrocer, live here, and I know what I must do. I behave in the manner expected of me. I am obedient, and therefore I have the right to be left in peace.
So the greengrocer would be ashamed to hang a sign that simply said, I'm afraid and therefore unquestionably obedient. He's a human being with dignity, So he needs a veil to hide his submission.
The ideology provides that veil, a high facade about worker unity to conceal the low foundation of his obedience, which is fear.
Then Havel imagines a what-if scenario. So one day the greengrocer simply stops playing the game. He stops putting up the slogan. He stops voting in elections he knows are a farce. He begins to say what he really thinks.
The system strikes back immediately. He's relieved of his post, sent to the warehouse. His pay is reduced. His children are denied access to education.
But even though he has no physical power, his act is incredibly dangerous to the regime. So by breaking the rules, he's disrupted the game as such. He's shown that it's just a game.
He shattered the world of appearances and pointed out that the emperor is naked. Because the system relies on everyone living within a lie to function, a single person choosing to live within the truth denies the system in principle and therefore threatens its existence entirely.
And that's why Carney referenced Havel's work. What happens when nations around the world can no longer sustain the lie that they've been living within?
The best way to explain how we've got here is to compare two presidential speeches, 35 years apart. George Bush Sr. in 1991, promising a new world based on rules and cooperation.
And Donald Trump in 2026, shredding the international order that his country had spent nearly 80 years building. From those speeches, we'll look at how two leaders, Carney in Canada and President Stubb in Finland, are responding to the collapse of the world order as we know it. So let's take you back to January the 29th, 1991. President George H.W. Bush, so George W. Bush's dad, addresses Congress. The Soviet Union is collapsing, the Gulf War is underway, and Bush is about to make a promise about what comes next.
And this is like the zenith of American power. The Cold War is pretty much ending. The US has won. The Berlin Wall has collapsed. Soviet Union has collapsed. And Bush is laying out his vision for the world.
So during his address, Bush announced what is at stake is more than one small country. It's a big idea, a new world order where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind, peace and security, freedom and the rule of law. A new world order. That's the key phrase. He's saying the chaos is over, 2 world wars, the Cold War, all that violence, it's done. Now we're going to build something better.
And it won't be just based on who has the biggest military. It'll be based on rules that everyone follows. Bush points to the United Nations as the model. He says the UN represents this vision. Nations working together, following international law and resolving conflicts peacefully.
So the promise is America will lead, but through institutions, through the UN, through international law, but not through raw power.
But as Mark Carney's speech at Davos suggests, and as Havel's greengrocer allegory asks, was the promise of a new world order simply a facade, a lie?
Because Bush also says American leadership is essential. America has a special role. So right from the start, there's this tension. Are the rules for everyone, or is America different? Is America the exception?
The bargain was basically this. America provides security, keeps the peace, backs these international institutions, and in exchange, everyone buys into democracy, capitalism, and international norms.
Even when it's not equal, America can veto things at the UN. America can decide when international law applies and when it doesn't. But everyone puts up the sign anyway. They sort of carry on with it.
Because putting up the sign saying, yes, we believe in the rules-based order is how you get to participate. It's how you stay safe.
And for a while in the 90s, it looked like this was working. Democracy was spreading. The Soviet Union was gone. Francis Fukuyama wrote a book called The End of History, saying that liberal democracy had won forever.
Everyone kept the sign in the window. Workers of the world unite, became we believe in the international rules-based order.
But underneath, everyone knew the reality. When America wanted to invade Iraq in 2003 without UN approval, it went ahead anyway. When Russia or China broke the rules, sometimes there were consequences, sometimes there weren't.
The system only worked as long as everyone pretended it was real, as long as everyone kept living within the lie. And that worked until someone decided to take the sign down.
which takes us to this year, to 2026.
So fast forward 35 years, and we're here right now in January 2026. Donald Trump gives his address to the World Economic Forum in Davos, and the contrast with George Bush Sr. could not be sharper.
So let's start with what Trump has already done by this point. So on the 3rd of January 2026, close to the anniversary of his second inauguration, the US launches a military invasion of Venezuela to extract the president from Caracas. No talk of weapons of mass destruction, no talk of bringing democracy. The message is clear. You have oil, and we want it.
And in his second inaugural address, Trump said this: the United States will once again consider itself a growing nation, one that increases our wealth, expands our territory, builds our cities, raises our expectations, and carries our flag into new and beautiful horizons.
Expand our territory. That's not the language of a defensive superpower. That's the language of empire building, really.
True. Which brings us to the elephant in the room, which is Greenland. Trump has been threatening Denmark with tariffs, talking about U.S. strategic interests in the Arctic, and demanding control of Greenland. At Davos, he was explicit about what he wants.
All we want from Denmark for national and international security and to keep our very energetic and dangerous potential enemies at bay is this land. Not lease it, not negotiate access. He wanted rights, title, and ownership. He's talking about acquiring sovereign territory from a NATO ally.
And it wasn't just once. He kind of repeated it multiple times that this is what he wanted. And when he talks about NATO, listen to this, quote, "We give so much and we get so little in return. All we're asking for is to get Greenland, including right, title, and ownership, because you need the ownership to defend it," end quote.
And he's treating a military alliance like a real estate transaction. So the Department of Defense has been renamed the Department of War, for example. The US military budget has increased substantially, and Trump's making it very clear the rules-based order is over.
So at Davos, he laid out a completely different vision. He told the assembled world leaders, quote, "The USA is the economic engine on the planet, and when America booms, the entire world booms. You follow us down and you follow us up," end quote.
So that's not partnership, that's dominance, that's domination. And then he made it explicit by saying without the United States, they wouldn't be making anything. He's not even pretending anymore. So he's talking about Switzerland not making anything, where Davos and the World Economic Forum is hosted. Bush talked about sort of multilateral cooperation. Trump is saying you need us more than we need you.
And on trade, he's equally blunt. He told the audience, which were multiple world leaders and so on, that instead of raising taxes on domestic producers, we're lowering them and raising tariffs on foreign nations to pay for the damage that they caused, end quote.
And this is all part of sort of Trump's belief in sort of like chopping up the world, basically, between American spheres of influence and Russian and Chinese, and that he's basically legitimizing all of these actions by saying, well, I need these natural resources to sustain our expansion, and we'll keep hold of our hemisphere and you deal with yours. And he even described negotiating with a European country over drug prices. He said, I'm putting a 25% tariff on everything that you sell into the United States and 100% tariff on your wines and champagnes. So that's not diplomacy, that's extortion.
Yeah, he literally, this was a quote from his supposed conversation with French President Emmanuel Macron. And it's also a very odd diplomatic tactic to, I don't know if I can call it that, but like a very odd tactic to kind of reveal internal conversations between world leaders. That doesn't help in creating any sort of stability within, the global markets, so to speak. Somebody who's kind of really experienced in the idea of real estate or the ups and downs of markets, you probably would have expected a little more tact on that front. but maybe not. However, if I have to sum it up, he's taken down the sign. But here's the key difference from Havel's greengrocer. The greengrocer takes down the sign to live within the truth. Trump takes down the sign to embrace naked power.
So the curtain is pulled back, and what's revealed isn't truth, it's the raw exercise of domination. There are two ways to stop living within the lie. You can embrace the truth and the principle, or you can embrace domination. So Trump has chosen domination.
And that creates a crisis for everyone else, or at least it seems it does, because the old bargain is dead. America is no longer pretending that the system is fair or is actually respecting its allies. So what do?
So if you're a middle power, like Canada or Finland, for decades, you've just been putting up the sign, pretending the rules matter, pretending international law applies, pretending American protection comes with respect.
Trump just ripped the sign off the wall and said, this was always about power. Welcome to the real world. So do you keep pretending? Do you try to negotiate with the old system? Or do you take down your own sign and build something new?
And that's where President Stubb comes in from Finland, and where Mark Carney comes in as well. So the day before, or a couple of days before Trump did his speech, and the day before Carney did his, on the 19th of January, Finland's President Alexander Stubb sat down with David Ignatius to have a sort of like a conversation about the way the world was playing out.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I listened to that conversation. I thought his command over numbers, policy, and just how articulate he was, I thought it was phenomenal to kind of listen to him. And he's a pretty interesting world leader at this point. He's a former prime minister, but he's also a former national level golfer. He's famously used that to build a link with Donald Trump. A quick reference to Mar-a-Lago, of course.
Yeah, and all the other courses that Trump has put his name on.
Yeah.
So Stubb sort of refers to this as golf diplomacy. It sounds quite trivial, but it's the world where the rules are where the rules are gone. Personal chemistry is all that's left. But then also, I mean, golf diplomacy exists in lots of arenas of life. If you think about business, for example, and other sectors, there's always been that element there of competition, of let's hit the links, let's talk it out, let's do this, that, and the other.
Yeah, I mean, it's predominantly been a very business, a transaction-oriented kind of a move where you try and one up the other, or you try and prop the other up and try and get what you want. And any tactic these days that you use to kind of, which is involving world leaders, you always add the suffix of diplomacy, right?
Yeah. There's always speculation about what did they say, and then you get all of these former advisors speculating on how the conversation would play out, and they talk about the old days.
Yeah,
that malarkey, and no one knows. They might have just sort of been walking around in silence and being socially awkward and hoping it was all over.
Exactly. It's a form of titillation in that sense, if it's kind of recorded on video from afar, and just makes you curious about what they're talking about, like you said.
Yeah, and it's like it's all a bit staged. Like, for example, I remember when president, who was the president in between Putin? President.
Dmitry Medvedev.
Yeah, Medvedev. Yeah, he went to America and met with Obama, and they went to a burger joint, and President ordered burgers, whatever, and Medvedev ordered it without the buns, and it really confused the Americans. They're like, "Oh, what is he?
Yeah,
without a bun." And I think he was using a fork and knife and everything. And Obama was just getting into his burger.
Yeah.
But it's just those sort of awkward, sort of staged moments.
This golf diplomacy is, it's all about personal chemistry, right? It's how personable you're able to make to the other person and to get the deal that you want to get. And in that interview, Stubb pretty much laid out 3 scenarios of the Greenland crisis: the good, the bad, and the ugly.
the good is sort of de-escalation, which we're sort of seeing now. The bad is total diplomatic rupture between Greenland and Denmark. And that's the thing. This is not just this is a tension between the US and Denmark. There's an inner tension there between Greenland being a colony, I guess you would call it, of Denmark, and Greenland having a population of 56,000 people. I mean, it is quite. When someone said that, when I saw that, I was just like, "Wow, okay." So there's, that's 56,000 people, like, versus a superpower.
And the ugly bit of this whole is that Stubb admitted that people are now quietly discussing the possibility of US military action against Denmark, a founding NATO ally. Although Trump did say in his speech that he's not going to do any sort of kinetic action.
The fact that ugly is even a talking point shows how much the floor has dropped out from under us. So Stubb's response is to work from the back office using personal ties and NATO structures to keep the room from exploding.
Yeah, in short, it's a survival strategy. Finland shares an 830-mile border with Russia. They cannot afford for the American shield to crack, so they're trying to patch it together with whatever they have.
The very next day, Mark Carney took to the stage at Davos and offered the complete opposite approach. Carney didn't talk about back offices or golf. He looked at the audience, invoked Havel's greengrocer. He said, "Friends, it's time for companies and countries to take down their signs." It's a very different approach.
And that is a massive statement for a sitting prime minister, especially a Canadian prime minister. He isn't saying that the order is under threat. He's saying it's dead.
And he's called it a rupture, not a transition. So this is a very bumpy period. And his solution is something he calls variable geometry, which does sound more like maths than it does physics, than it does politics, which sounds like a sort of, high school maths class, but actually it's a survival guide to the 21st century.
Maybe he's applying maths diplomacy.
Good Lord, how about, not numbers, man.
But think of the old world like a rigid box, right? You were in an alliance, and that alliance decided your trade, your friends, and your wars. Variable geometry throws that box away. It says you build different coalitions for different problems.
So if you look at Canada right now on Ukraine, they're like a core group against Russia. I think it's a coalition of the willing. On the Arctic sovereignty, they're standing with Denmark, which puts them directly at odds with Trump.
And on trade, they're bypassing Washington directly to build bridges between the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the EU. It's agile. It's issue by issue, not block by block. Carney calls it value-based realism.
So you stay principled on sovereignty, but you're pragmatic about the fact that your partners won't always be perfect allies. That's why Canada has been moving so fast. They've doubled defense spending, cut internal trade barriers, and fast-tracked $1 trillion in investment. This is all according to Carney. So this is all sort of work in progress.
They even signed a strategic partnership with China. It's a total diversification. Carney's logic is, quote, if we are not at the table, then we're on the menu, end quote.
It's quite a good one. I like that.
Yeah.
And also that's why Keir Starmer's in China.
Yeah.
He's sort of doing the same thing. This is pragmatism, realism, whatever you want to call it. And that's the truth part of the Havel equation. Carney is admitting that Canada can't rely on the rules-based order that the leader of the free world no longer believes in.
So we have two middle powers, two different paths. Stubb is trying to manage the crisis from within the old system. Carney is building a new system from the ruins.
But here's the catch. Stubb has a Russian border. He might not have the luxury of taking his sign down. If he stops pretending the old rules work, the security of Finland could vanish overnight.
Is Stubb being a pragmatist, or is he still living within the lie because the truth is too terrifying?
And then if you flip it flip this over, is Carney being a visionary or is he being recklessly naive? So, Canada has 9% of the world's oil reserves and a lot of rare earth minerals. They have leverage, but most countries don't. And also, he's got a massive border with the United States, so it's all at risk. And then he's got Russia on his border as well. So it's
Yeah, I mean, and that's why the Davos speech was a really recruitment drive, or one could call it even a rallying cry, right? Carney knows that variable geometry only works if other middle powers like Australia, South Korea, and the Europeans join in. And if I'm not wrong, he's going to be visiting India, and as well later in the year. And India and Canada have had really choppy relations for the last couple of years due to various diplomatic setbacks and other internal issues, fomenting, anti-India sentiments within Canada and so on and so forth. So India's taken a very strong position where I think they've kind of kept that aside, and they want to kind of build a relationship post the former Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. So yeah, I think the chess pieces are moving.
One greengrocer taking down a sign is a target. The first person to put their hand up, to stand up in class, go, this is nonsense, that they're very vulnerable. But 1,000 greengrocers taking down their signs is a revolution. So what do we look for next?
I think it's honestly, people really need to keep a close watch on the language and what is being said between the lines. That's where the trick is. If we start hearing strategic autonomy or flexible coalitions, or from Seoul or Canberra, we know Barney's recruitment is working.
And watch Greenland. If Trump pushes and the middle powers successfully push back without the old NATO rulebook, we'll know the game has officially changed. And I think actually that Trump is rowing back on a lot of the Greenland stuff. He's still saying it, but it's not going in the same way. I think there's a deal now to expand the because America has a base in Greenland anyway, and this is the silly thing. A lot of these discussions come up because it's all sort of presenting as being powerful, but in reality, Trump could do all the things he wants to do anyway within the current agreement with Greenland. He has a huge military presence. He can have military maneuvers in the Arctic and everything anyway. That nothing's really stopping him from doing that. Smoke and mirrors, really.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of the old shock and awe kind of tactic which most right-wing populist leaders tend to apply to their approaches when it comes to policy decisions or military decisions. Yeah, we'll also have to keep a very close watch on the movement of the American naval fleet that is around the Gulf, the Persian Gulf at this point in time, how the Iran situation either escalates or de-escalates at this point in time. One could even argue that this is like a bargaining sort of a tactic which the United States is utilizing to rally the European Union or the NATO allies to kind of together put pressure on Iran and kind of destabilize the regime so that they get further control over natural resources. But that is still conjecture. Kind of brings me to what it means for the rest of the world, I suppose, that we're not just watching a policy debate. We're kind of seeing the end of an era or a system that existed based on mutual respect to a certain extent.
I didn't really mention about Stubb or Carney. I was talking to my friend Alex earlier about this, actually, that Carney is probably uniquely placed to provide a commentary on where the world is at the moment, because he's so ingrained into the economic model that we see around the world. A governor of the Bank of Canada, governor of the Bank of England, made some very key interventions during the Brexit debate, which is 10 years since Brexit this year, for example. And then since being the governor of the Bank of England, continued to be vocal. I was quite surprised when he actually ran to be Prime Minister, but it sort of ended up making quite a lot of sense, technocratic, but also very personable. And he's able to make this observation to say, look, the world is changing. We can't, the US is no longer a reliable partner. We have to make these choices. And Stubb, on the other hand, is, a student of politics. He's, as you say, very astute, has a very good assessment of the world. And the Finns, they have a very complicated sort of history. in terms of their relationship with Russia and the role that, Western alliances have played in screwing Finland over in the past, and lots of betrayal and all of that sort of stuff. So he's hyper aware of the situation. And former Prime Minister Senna, sort of same sort of situation, that these are two people that are very reliable sources of people to listen to. But I think the reality, as ever with discussion about politics, is somewhere in the middle. That there's still a bit of wiggle room left in the old system. There's still a bit of life left in the old gal. But there's also then this other element where everything's sort of falling apart, what's left. So, Bush's New World Order lasted for 35 years. The wider model of America serving as a superpower is extended close to 100 years. And that's not long in sort of historical context. So if you think about like the Concert of Europe, for example, which was sort of a peace between 1815 and 1914, or the British Empire, or, you can go back further and further, and there were much longer periods of normalcy, or norms being made.
Yeah, 100%. The post-war American order is either close to collapsing or is slowly collapsing, I would say, within a single generation. And what replaces it is genuinely uncertain. Trump's vision is naked, great power competition. Everyone for themselves, might makes right.
And Carney's vision is more hopeful, middle powers coordinating, building flexible coalitions, creating collective resilience. But it's untested. We don't know if it works. And when I was an undergrad at the University of Kent, there was a lot of talk about, are we moving into a multilateral world where, you have lots of, India and rise of China. Because bearing in mind, I always talk about China in terms of how far it's gone in its economic development. It's the same with India, but the extreme for China is that in 1971, it was still basically a feudal system. Well, even in 2005, the UK economy was larger than the Chinese economy. And now, it has built this juggernaut of an economy where it's sort of absorbing investment and, trade with other countries. It's leading on things like, electric cars and batteries, building most of the world's wind farms within, several generations, not even within a lifetime, has gone from being a feudal country to being the second, arguably the most powerful economy in the world.
It's true that we don't know what the future holds for us, or for, what the global order, if there is going to be a global order or not, or if there's going to be, I think there's a realignment of ideologies and friendships that's happening at this point in time. It's like the game that we used to play as kids, right? Musical chairs. I don't know if you guys played it. Like till the music is happening, we're just running around the seats, and then when the music stops, you try and find the seat. So it's, we were kind of seated for a while, and now the music has started playing again. So now it's like, okay, we're just trying to figure out what is happening. And there's going to be different approaches to that. So Stubbs' approach is essentially crisis management based on where he's placed, where his country is positioned geographically, militarily, diplomatically, and try and hold certain things together, buy time, and hopefully a certain amount of sanity prevails, or a certain amount of, leverage is gained by then. But like, you have to see till what time that they can actually go ahead and manage this crisis, or till what time this crisis is actually going to last. Either of the two.
I saw an announcement a couple of days ago, doomsday clock is getting closer to 85 seconds away from doomsday. That's good news. So the optimistic case is that, Carney is right, that middle powers can actually build something more stable than the old order, or more flexible, more resilient, less dependent on one great power's benevolence.
And keeping everything else aside, the pessimistic case is that we're heading for a world of blocks and spheres of influence, US-aligned countries, China-aligned countries, and everyone else squeezed in between. Yeah, it kind of sounds like a Cold War 2.0, right?
Yeah, or a game of very real game of risk.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, the realistic case is probably somewhere in the middle. Some middle powers will follow Carney, some will stick with Stubbs' approach, some will try to play both sides, and the result will be messy and complicated. And also, look, we've presented this narrative from the Western perspective as well. If you were to go to India or China or in the Middle East, talk to Erdogan or anyone that's from Turkey, and they will see, the conflict of culture and nations and, empires come and go. And probably skepticism about the real power of America versus, the resilience of other places in the world. So
That's true. But, if you had to kind of sum it up, what we do see and very realistically see is that the sign is coming down. Whether countries take it down voluntarily like Carney, or whether it is ripped off like Trump is doing, or whether it's done in a very slow manner through various decisions, trade deals, and multilateral statements, and so on. The show has kind of ended in that sense, or is slowly coming to an end.
And as Havel would say, that's actually progress, because living within a lie is corrosive. It breeds cynicism, destroys trust, undermines legitimacy.
Living within the truth is harder. It's riskier, but it's the only way to build something real.
So maybe the question isn't, can middle powers succeed, but what does success even look like in a world without the old certainties?
And we're going to find that out, because 2026 is the year the experiment begins. And that, ladies and gents, brings us to the end of yet another episode of The Political Dispatch. This is the first of what we think will be many episodes this year about the changing world order.
So, Sim, what do you think, what we got lined up after this? We talked a little bit about the Middle East and other parts of the world. Any thoughts of where we're going to go next in The Political Dispatch?
Yeah, I think a quick preview of what the next episode is going to look like is going to be focused on Iran and how the revolution that took place in 1979 and the protests that are taking place in January 2026 and a few in 2025 have eerie similarities, and that there's a certain movement, but what is really going to be the outcome? Are we going to be seeing an Iranian revolution again in 2026? We don't know that yet, but it would be interesting to for the listeners to gain a certain amount of context of what happened in the 70s, what led to the revolution, and how is Iran placed now in terms of world politics, in terms of how it's dealing with its neighbors, and can a revolution actually bring down the existing regime of the Ayatollah? So, and is that what even certain countries want? So it'll be an interesting episode that kind of navigates through all of that, and really looking forward to sharing that with everyone.
Yes, it's cool. It's cool subjects. Something I don't know a huge amount as well, so I'm looking forward to learning more. Obviously, we do sort of preface it with the fact that hundreds, thousands of people are dying from being killed in protest, and this is real life in Iran, and it's a very dangerous situation at the moment. So all of our thoughts are with all the people that are fighting the good fight, and I think there's lessons to be learned from the Arab Spring, for example. In 2011-ish, when lots of these long-standing regimes collapsed. And there was a hope that democracy, this obsession with democracy will work everywhere. Democracy is a good thing in a particular context. So, yeah, I'm quite interested to see how it plays out. And even the former Shah of Iran's son, he's trying to position himself, for example. So there's lots of different people that are trying to get their oar into the situation.
So till we come back to you with the next episode, do follow us. Go back to the same source where you found this episode, and we'll be back soon analyzing more politics from around the world.
So my name is Tom Spare.
And I'm Sid Kurupati. You've been listening to The Political Dispatch.